Everyone, welcome back to the Minute Women Podcast. My name is Grace.
And I'm Linnea, and we have another fabulous Have You Got a Minute? So if you've got a minute, listen to this. And we have amazing guest Sarah here from Intoxicated Podcast.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
She was so good on one episode that we had to have her back.
That was so great.
Yeah. And so today we're going to start off by just kind of talking about Sarah's podcast and then getting into women in podcasting and kind of all of our experiences.
Yeah.
So, Sarah, take it away.
Oh my gosh. So I'm the host of Intoxicated Podcast. It's been going for 4 years. Well, I guess over 4 years at this point. But I took a little break at the 4-year mark and I'm back and sort of relaunched it out to the world. But essentially it's just a comedy podcast all about like diving into like the people behind the art, the people behind the performance. So, like whatever you do, I have comedians on, I have performers, I have characters, like whoever you are, it's just all about like kind of diving deeper into who the person is behind what they do. So it started off as a drinking podcast. It has quickly changed to a sometimes drinking podcast.
We're currently drinking.
We are currently drinking now. So this is kind of, we got some intoxicated vibes going on.
This is our homage.
Yes.
We're having mimosas.
We sure
are.
It
we're having
helps.
deep conversations.
Yeah. It helps to open people up for sure. So I always say, like, whatever your thing is, like if you want to have a coffee on the show, bring a coffee. If you want to bring a Red Bull, like whatever it is to make you feel better about talking, let's do that. But yeah, it wasn't sustainable as a weekly drinking podcast. It quickly became obvious that I could not be drunk every single time. But that's how it started, and it's evolved, and that's the joy of podcasting. It can change with you, and I've had so much fun with it, and like, yeah, it's just been such a journey.
Yeah.
Hard question. Not your favorite, because I feel like that's really difficult, but who's been your most interesting guest?
Oh my gosh, most interesting guest. Yeah. Oh my god, that's really tough. I've done like over 200 episodes.
Yeah.
I mean, a frequent guest that I've had on is Travis Lindsay, who's perhaps one of the best comedians, if not the best, in Halifax right now. Travis, shout out. But what's interesting about him is he's done multiple episodes.
Right.
But like we've kind of gotten closer over the times that he's come on. And so we really deep dive into comedy, and like those are the ones that I walk away going, I just had it kind of feels like you had a master class in comedy after you talk to Travis.
Yeah, that's so cool.
Because he's, like over 11 years into comedy, and it's just really insightful. And I feel like other comedians tune in to those episodes because they're just like, we just want to hear this guy talk about his craft. So
that's cool.
And so, were you a stand-up comedian when you started Intoxicated?
No.
Oh wow. So
no.
But it was always. So it didn't start as like a comedy podcast per se, right?
It was a
bit.
comedy podcast, but it didn't have comedians until about
right. Okay.
Until about 2 years in or so, like a year and a half, 2 years is when I started kind of tapping into local comedians.
Yeah.
And then I just made friends with local comedians, started hanging out with them all the time. And really, like, my dive into stand-up comedy is still fairly new because as soon as I started being friends with them, going to shows more regularly, I was kind of in the scene without being a comic.
Right.
If that makes any sense.
Yeah.
Like,
You were
people
a groupie.
saw me as without the good benefits of that. But yeah, no, I was kind of entrenched in the scene in a weird way where people would look at me and go, she's a comedian, but I had never been on stage before.
Right.
So only a year ago is when I started doing stand-up.
Oh wow.
And
that's
it was really just like, I should just try this. I feel like I developed a bit of a comedic muscle with podcasting with comedians.
Sure.
To a point where I was like, I think I have some jokes. I think I could give this a go. And have been at it ever since. I've done over 70 sets in a year, including lockdowns.
So, like, do you identify more as a stand-up comedian, or do you identify more as a podcaster?
Probably still a podcaster at this point.
Yeah,
I still feel fairly new. I feel like podcasting is my expertise and, like, more my comfort zone.
It's safer. Yeah.
It's safer. And it's also different because, and you guys should identify with this too, like, where, like, you can just really be yourself and have fun with your podcast. You're not seeing an instant reaction from people.
Right.
You know that you're putting it out into the world and that people will maybe laugh when they see it, but you're not seeing the instant validation that stand-up gives you.
Which I'm sure it has like a lot of highs and a lot of lows, right?
Yeah.
Like,
well, that's just
like
it,
the
right?
highs are so high, and then like the lows are like,
and then the lows feel like so bad.
Yeah.
But the highs make it worth it and makes you try it again. And it is just it's something that it was a nice transition for me, like from podcasting to stand-up, but it is very different.
Yeah.
Right.
Very different art.
It's very cool, too, to be a female podcast, or not a female podcaster, but a female comic. Both actually, but a female stand-up comedian, like in this, kind of climate and especially with what's going on. I mean, I grew up watching Just for Laughs and watching a lot of stand-ups, and there weren't great women to like watch and grow up on, but like now, I mean, and it's not everybody's flavor, but I remember watching Eliza Schilzinger and just being like oh, like shoot, like women can be funny, like women can be crude and funny and witty and do stand up really well, which has brought me to another female comedian who I love, which is Meg Martin, who's Canadian.
I don't know her.
Oh, she's funny.
Okay.
Yeah, so she has a show on Netflix now called Feel Good.
Ooh.
And I am saying she, but I think May is now them. But they are really funny as well.
No way.
A little more of that depressing comedy, a lot of self-deprecation. But in the world that we're living in right now, I think everybody's feeling a little bit of self-deprecation.
It's challenging to do that type of comedy as a female.
Right.
I will say, having been like the only female on many male lineups.
Yeah.
The issue you run into with those types of jokes is we are in this age of female empowerment, so audience members just want to go, oh, and they want to be able to root for you, not feel sorry for you.
Yeah.
And it's really tough. Like, I have very self-deprecating dark jokes, and it is a challenge to make them feel okay to laugh
at it, right?
And that's why you'll notice, like, even though there are so many female comedians, if you look at any lineup of like a pro lineup, it's still just one woman or one or two maybe. We still aren't really hitting totally equal. So even when you're at like pro level, which takes so much work to get there, I mean decades sometimes, like you're still struggling to see equal lineups of females and any minority, which is a challenge.
Which is like definitely something similar of podcasting and stand-up is like podcasting and stand-up for a long time in my mind was like occupied by like bro white guys. Yeah. Like it's the Joe Rogan podcast.
I was just going to say, insert
the
Joe
biggest
Rogan.
podcasts are hosted by like these bro dudes just with hot takes. Yeah. And that never intrigued me.
Who can say whatever they want and they say it with enough confidence that people just take it for what it is.
Because they're lucky to have that instant confidence that like we have to work so hard to get. But if you'll notice, like, I mean, that said, like, if you look at the true crime category of podcasts,
I was just gonna say, like,
it's like dominated by women.
True crime was like the entry point for like female podcasting. I feel like that's like My Favorite Murder. Like those were the first.
Because we are the target,
right? Yeah,
so we have that
target audience and target in the stories. Like you can.
True.
But I think it's also because I think women have convinced themselves, and also you like are in a market that probably believes it's probably justified that like no one's just going to tune in for a woman's hot takes.
Right.
Like it needs to be about something, and then you just need to be a good hostess.
Which is why it's sad. It's not something that's easy to deal with when you are someone who has stuff to say.
Yeah, for sure. Like, and I think like we probably do it on both of our podcasts, but I mean like for us, Minute Women is ultimately about Canadian history and heritage minutes, but it's our opinions about Canadian history and heritage minutes. Yeah. And I've loved doing these like Have You Got a Minute episodes because it's more of an opportunity for us to just talk.
Yeah, to personally talk about, exactly.
Things that we're interested in.
And you have women in your title, so you're instantly telling people, we are two women talking about it from a women's perspective, which I think is interesting because as soon as you frame it as we are women talking about things from our perspective, people feel more comfortable. Like, if you'll notice, and going back to stand-up, if you ever do like a ladies' night show, it's always a great turnout, and the crowds are always great. And I think it is because we're like, we're all women, we're in this together. It's okay if you laugh. But then if you put a woman on stage with a bunch of men, they instantly don't laugh as loud.
They want to coddle.
They want to coddle. They want to just kind of chuckle under their breath because like they feel bad laughing at a joke. And then you see men up there saying the most horrific stuff.
Yeah. And like getting riotous laughs.
People are busting a gut at it. Yeah. And it's just, it's a challenge because it would be nice to get to a point where, you know, women can thrive on non-women's shows.
Yeah.
So I could talk about this all day. I could pop off about this all day. It's just such an issue.
I have a friend who's a drag queen and has a very similar like take on that, and that like they've done ladies' nights and stuff at places, and it's just such a more receptive, fun audience because everybody feels safe. Yep. Like, you know, women are there and you're with your girlfriends and you don't feel like you're trying to impress anybody, and you as a drag queen feel like you're in a safe place where you're with people who are like, again, like you just feel safe and it feels more secure. Whereas if you're at a show and you're dealing with the male audience as well, like things are different.
It's just different.
It's just different. Yeah. And like he has like expressed that, and he's like, you know, like he does Zara Matrix does a lot of shows at the Garden.
Oh, nice. I've been meaning to go.
I work with his mom, and she is Kim Myra is the most supportive mother. I had to send a message to her son, which is how we got to chatting, because she's just, I'm like, you have like such a great mom. Like, you are so lucky. She loves you. She is so proud of you. And I was so like,
bless her.
And he's like, yes, I am. I'm incredibly lucky. She's amazing. But like, she's the first to like show everybody the pictures. She's like, look at my son this weekend. Look up. She's like, he can dance. None of the other drag queens can dance. Sorry for the shade to the other drag queens. Yeah, I love it. So.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. It's challenging, but I think it is. Both podcasting and comedy, stand-up comedy, is kind of a more masculine thing to do. Like, you're really saying, shut up and listen to me.
Yeah.
Which is a very male trait.
Yeah.
And so...
That's a great name for a podcast.
Shut up and listen
to me.
Shut
up and listen to me.
Do we have a podcast now?
Yeah.
Between the three of us?
Oh my God.
New podcast.
Shut up and listen to me.
I love that.
So it is challenging, but I do think women have great perspectives on things because of the challenges we've faced.
Yeah.
So it's better than males. No, I'm just joking.
We are superior.
So when you started Intoxicated, like, what was your hope for it? Like, why did you start it?
Ooh, good question.
I mean, I just kind of started it because I wanted to have fun with my friends and record it. That was really, truly why I wanted to do it. And also, too, like, when I started it, I was so cocky in that I was like, no one in Halifax is doing this, so I'm going to do it.
No, you're like one of the oldest like Halifax podcasts for sure.
I think at the time I was,
and now there's such an industry for it here.
And now it's
but people know Intoxicated. Like, I knew about your podcast before we were even recording a podcast together.
That's wild to me because I make jokes being like, I feel like it's a guilty pleasure for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Because I do feel like people know about it, but like I don't necessarily know that they know about it.
Yeah.
So like as a podcaster, I'm still striving for that like engagement and that like knowing that, because a lot of people I think like will message me privately and be like, I really enjoyed the show, and I'm like, can you put it in an Instagram comment? Can you put it in an iTunes review?
I need the circulation.
Can you share it?
Can you share it? So I'm at this point, I'm kind of like really trying to take it up a notch to get that added engagement, because I am so proud of it, and it has been going for so long, and it was such an evolution, because it really truly did start as I want to drink with my funny friends and make other people laugh from our conversations. Then I was like, ooh, there's like certain topics I want to cover. Like, we did a whole Me Too episode when Me Too happened. I was in the middle of podcasting when that movement really came out.
Yeah.
And I sat down with
so
like
long ago.
three female friends, and we all just talked about our own experiences with that and like stuff like that. So I started diving into more issues that are more uncomfortable issues. And so it kind of became a mix of like comedy, but also with these topics that are hard to talk about.
Yeah.
And then really, as soon as I got comedians on, it really took off in terms of, I found kind of the type
Your
of
niche.
guest. Yeah, the type of guest that I would want, because they're public facing, they're willing to share it, they're really comfortable coming on talking, versus like regular people who might be a little more like, ooh, I'm going to talk about this, but I don't want to tell you my real name. That was a challenge for me, because I'm like, I want you to share it though. So I did have to start getting more like public facing people, which I thought was a good shift for me. And now I'm just really at a point where I'm trying to hone in on everything I've learned here at Podstarter.
Because, Sarah and I work together at Podstarter.
Me and Grace work at Podstarter. Podstarter.io for all your podcasting needs. Yeah. Wink.
Little
Sarah,
plug.
I always say Sarah's the keeper of knowledge. She just knows how to do everything.
Oh my gosh.
No, honestly, last night while we were like drinking and catching up and like talking about our lives, like Grace literally just talked about how she's like, it's so great. Like she's like, Sarah's the type of person who she's never gonna like force her, like she's gonna let you figure out how to do stuff on your own, but if you're like, I need help, immediately Sarah's like, yes, I am that person.
Yeah, no, I think that's important, because you do have to self-learn, but also it's also important to like share your knowledge. And like I've encountered so many things in 4 years of podcasting.
No, exactly. I always say, I was like, like Sarah is the best kind of mentor, which is like totally what I see you as here, because like you definitely, like you personally have the most knowledge about podcasting. Like Reese has been in the podcasting field, who is our boss, but Reese is more film oriented.
Right.
That's where his career was for the most part.
He's the businessman. He's like,
no, he is not the businessman. John is business. John is like actual dad, and Reese is fun dad.
But
like that is the way it works.
Reese knows the business of podcasting.
Yes, he knows it very.
I mean, he has a lot of connections, and like he's amazing at what he does.
But yes, you're
He's
right.
incredible.
Jonathan is the dad.
But the thing is, what's cool about the mentor thing, like you're saying that about me, but like I could say the same thing about you in terms of like your knowledge and your research and like how well written you are, and like like that's something that I don't have experience in. So like I think it's just a good friendship and like coworker dynamic where we can learn from each other.
And I always say like, and like I haven't said this to your face, but I do always say it, which I feel bad now. It's like in front of a mic, so it sounds really ingenuine. But I like Sarah's the best kind of mentor where she's never gonna like tell you how to do something. She's never gonna like impose her knowledge on you and be like, you're doing that wrong, or like this is even like a subtle way of being like, oh, there's actually a better way to do this. Like you never do that. But if it's ever like I'm falling behind on something, or like I don't know how to do this, it's just like immediately like drop everything, like we'll help you with it. Like which is so
that means
nice.
a lot.
Yeah.
I don't want to Sarah-splain. No. Because the thing about mansplaining is you're making assumptions, and I think it's so important to like hang back and not make any assumptions about people until you know for sure what they want help with.
Yeah.
And it's like it's very common in comedy for male comics to give tons of opinions about a female set, and like it's just an ability that you have to really trust your gut and like let's just, again, not assume anything about anybody.
Yeah, or like jumping in and saying like what you're trying to say is this, and it's like it's amazing when it's like that's not at all what I'm trying to say, but thank you.
And I also think a simple thing people can do is ask if the person wants feedback.
Ooh,
yeah.
Because that instantly takes any type of mansplaining out of it. If you just go, do you want some feedback on this? Like literally, you can just say it like that.
Yeah,
and it makes it way better.
Yeah,
but you also seem like the type of person who, if you asked that and I was like, no, you would not be offended by that. There's a lot of people, and I feel like sometimes men in positions of authority, like if they're like, oh, do you want my help with that? Like, do you want my advice? And I'm like, no, that would be seen as like a slight.
Yeah.
That's true.
It's like if you are putting art or anything out into the world, it's assumed that you're also asking for response and criticism of it. And obvious, and it's in such like a workaholic like world that we live in, where perfection is something that everyone's chasing. It sounds ignorant to say, no, I do not want feedback,
right?
Or like, no, I do not want criticism on this. Where like sometimes that's just like it's not even like, it's not that I don't want it to be better or I don't want help. It's that like I'm not in a like place where I'm gonna be able to like take that feedback in a positive way. So just like don't give it.
That's exactly it. That's exactly it.
Yep.
There's been many times that like I've had bad sets and I've sat down.
I thought you were going to say bad sex, and I was like...
Kind of sounds like it. I've had a lot of that, too.
Okay.
But like,
It's like immediate review. Yeah. It's like, do you want feedback on that session? It's like, no.
But that's what happens with comedy, because you'll have like a not so great set, and like a comic friend will just be like, do you want feedback on it? And I just go, can you just give me tonight?
Yeah,
exactly.
Tell me tomorrow.
Yeah.
And with podcasting, again, going back to the fact that it's like not necessarily an active audience. You know people are listening, but you don't know when. You don't see their face. It's a similar thing where, you know, like with podcasting, I'm just like, give me the feedback. I want to hear you talk, because I don't see you while you're listening, so I really don't know what's hitting and what's not. And it's really, podcasting is a gutsy thing to do.
Right.
Can we all just say that right now? It's gutsy.
I mean, like our
put your
first
voice out there.
episode, we got like criticism back. Like,
Did you really?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Was it from a stranger or someone you knew?
Stranger.
They were just sort of like,
Oh, I wish we had it was an Apple Podcast review.
It's very much like you didn't get what this was supposed to be. Like, we
However,
were talking about like Irish history, and
Irish orphans.
Irish orphans, and so this guy was basically like extremely critical that we were laughing about like the potato famine and like stuff like that, where it's like, this is a comedy podcast.
Yeah, look at the category.
Also, we're
it's in.
clearly not laughing at people starving to death. We're laughing
No.
at the like continued failure of a government to address it. Like, that's what we were joking about.
And what was more interesting about it is that in this lengthy review,
it was very long.
Review, the dude, I think it was a guy. I think by the name we figured out it was a guy. Anyway, this person listened to the whole episode.
Yeah,
like,
I just imagine him like rage listening to it.
no, I imagine like taking notes, like wrong, immature.
gosh.
But there was something about what we were spewing into the ether.
Oh yeah, it was a useless. Like we take up like a useless amount of space in the ether or something like that. It was ridiculous.
Please,
I love
take a
it.
picture of that review and frame it.
Oh, we must have it somewhere.
Because
I know. Yeah, I have
that's
it.
insane.
It's
Also,
so funny.
why do people feel the need to over criticize free content?
I know, it's free content. That's what we always say here at work. It's just like, I don't know what they want. It's free.
Yeah.
Like, you're not paying to listen to any of the content
We didn't
put
make
out.
you. We didn't hold your hand over a hot like stove and
Not
say
even our live shows
like,
were paid.
No.
Like, none of this is paid content.
That's insane. And yeah, it's, if you're gonna leave a review, don't leave a bad one. Email the podcaster. Send them an email. Why would you put that on a review?
Oh,
where
yeah.
it's gonna just like tank the show, and then they're not gonna have the confidence to want to get better because they're seeing these reviews. And it's just like, an email would be a better way to do it. Just be like, I'm a first-time listener. Here's some thoughts. I feel like most podcasters would appreciate that.
We've had those too. At the very beginning, we had an email from a guy who just corrected us on like something that we said, and like
we said something off the cuff and we got some fact wrong, and he like emailed us.
Oh, that Pierre Elliott Trudeau's funeral, and
we said that
oh god,
Jean Chrétien was dead, and he very much wasn't dead.
Yeah, Pierre Elliott Trudeau is dead, and that is the funeral procession I was remembering from my childhood.
Yeah.
Although Jean Chrétien, as we've discussed,
he looks like
he could be
he
dead.
looks like a walking corpse. So our
so this gentleman, he sent us an email and was just like, hey, I just wanted to let you know he's alive and well-ish, like, good job with your content, like, just wanted you to know. And like, that's helpful. That is the kind of like, that is criticism that I respect and like we need. It's like thank you for pointing that out. We brought it up in another episode. Gave the guy a nice shout out. Thank you so much.
Yep.
Like, and I forget his name now.
You can make a joke out of the fact that you messed up.
Absolutely, which we did.
We have a sorry segment. We've just been so perfect lately. We haven't had to use it.
We haven't done it lately.
Maybe you'll do one from this episode. Sorry we had Sarah on.
I feel like there's something we can be sorry for. Like, that's what's helpful. That's what's
exactly.
useful.
It's, oh my gosh, it's just
trolls.
Criticism is such a strange thing when you're like a female creator in some way, because it's like you said, like there's this like polarizing opinion of it where either, you know, you just like, one side of the coin is that you're putting something out there, so you're just opening yourself up to criticism, and if you don't take it, then you're being ignorant to improvement. And then the other side of the coin is like, because we're women and we're supposed to be supporting women, like you can never say anything bad about it ever.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I come from like an academic background where like criticism is just, it's the given. Like you're
used to
always
it.
supposed to be critical of
Right.
everything. And like nothing is perfect. And you're always getting criticism from your peers and from your colleagues who, you know, like I wrote a paper and submitted it to a journal and I got it back as like, there's like 4 categories of revision. So it's like publishable with minor revisions, publishable with major revisions, and then not publishable.
Okay.
And so I got it back with publishable with major revisions, which was totally fair because like I had slapped together that paper really hastily. And it needed it. It needed major revisions. I'm
Right.
still working on those major revisions.
Major revisions, our next podcast.
Major
Yeah.
revisions. But like, I remember like opening it, and it's just one of those things where it's just like, I knew it wasn't a good paper, and so when I opened it, I was like, it's not gonna be good. It's not gonna be good. And I remember like, and it's just like major revisions. This like whole write up of like, basically you have to rewrite the paper, and this is how you're gonna do it, and da 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 da. Just like crying because it's like
God.
always tears immediately. It's just
Yeah.
like, oh, crying, whatever.
Yeah.
And then like but then you come back to it 24 hours later, and you're like, okay, I totally appreciate what this person is saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I am going to like follow it. And then also being able to look at that and be like, I'm not going to write the paper that they have outlined because that's not the paper I want to write. But I am going to take this criticism and use it to the best of my ability.
Yes, that's very helpful.
Which is hopefully in academia what the person who made those revisions wanted.
Yeah. And it's like, because it's still like,
You know, they gave you help and support, and they were like, you know, these are my hot takes from this essay that I maybe can tell that you slapped together. So
Probably,
like,
yeah.
here are the changes I want you to make, and then like, but allowing you to take that on yourself and say, maybe I want to go in a bit of a different direction. Like maybe,
for
you know,
sure. And like they even said at the bottom, it's like, I hope that the like author does not take these like revisions like I hope they take them like it's told in a positive tone and like hopefully to make the paper as best as it can be. Like they were very like, it's like, I hope they don't consider these revisions overwhelming.
Yeah.
I just think like this is important research and it should be framed differently.
that's their job, and that's
Absolutely.
their job. Yeah,
Absolutely. And so it's also a process of being able to like treat yourself like the expert. Like this person made very apt criticisms of something.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I'm the expert because I did all the research. And so using their criticism, I know how it should be worded and framed, not them.
right.
Like they have a good point.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, even though my work is criticized and should be critiqued,
Yeah.
it's a process of like not like diminishing your own
Yeah.
value, which is like I feel
Yeah.
like across the board something
And
that
it can
like
be
women
really-
especially have to deal with.
Yeah.
It can be really easy to instantly go to, oh yes, you're so right, I'll make those changes.
Yeah.
It's really hard to stand in your power. It sounds cheesy to say, but to stand in your power and go,
Yeah.
I know what I'm talking about, and I'm still going to write this in my voice. Like when you're talking about papers, I'm thinking about jokes.
Yeah.
It's a similar thing when people give feedback on jokes, because they give feedback based on how they're hearing it, but you're going to rewrite it still in your voice.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, a very similar thing. So.
Yeah, because like you're the person that has to live with it. Like, your name is going to be the one attached to it, and like, so you have to be happy with it at the end of the day, no matter what you're making or writing or producing.
Oh, 100%.
Well, earlier you two were talking about, you know, being in a kind of mentor-mentee kind of relationship. And I think that draws on a really nice point about like constructive criticism and working on projects, and whether it be jokes or podcasting, in that I have learned just as much or more in a mentor role than I from the person I'm mentoring, like about how I teach and how I give, you know, constructive criticism and how I interact and lead.
Yeah.
You know, you learn, so that's such a reciprocal relationship.
Oh, big time.
And I think a lot of people don't see it that way.
They don't. They're just
You
like,
know,
I'm the expert. I'm telling you what I know.
It changes you from being a leader to like a dictator.
Yes.
Or
Yes,
just
exactly.
a dick. Or just a dick. But
So true.
Dick spelled D-I-C-T.
yeah, dicked. That's funny. But yeah, I think if you can really embrace being a mentor and a teacher and a leader, I think that you can learn so much. And I think that's how you are a good leader, is when you embrace those people who are learning from you, embrace those followers, and encourage and engage. And and learn from them. I think that's
Don't
really
let
powerful.
the ego take over. Don't let your head get too big, because you can always learn something, no matter how far along you are in anything. And like, totally agree. Holy smokes.
Do you think like gender has impacted the way that you like mentor people or receive mentorship, especially from like male mentors? Because I know in my academic career, I have always had male advisors, and I never had a female professor in history until I was at my master's degree. Like, history of all of the liberal arts is the one dominated by men.
Yeah. Because men know everything. Didn't you know, Grace?
Because men know everything.
Wrong.
But it's also because women feel kind of like what we talked about in our Agnes MacPhail thing, is that women feel like if they're coming into the space as a woman, they have to write women's history. And that is what is available to them. And so many departments.
What you're doing.
No, I don't do women's history. I try to incorporate women's perspectives because that is just a more accurate representation of societies and peoples.
Right.
But like, I'm not a woman's history historian. No. Like, that's not my area of expertise. Right. Hence, I usually wind up with, I've always had a male advisor, like undergrad, master's, and now going into my PhD. My supervisor advisor has always been a man. And I've been incredibly fortunate in the sense that they've all been absolutely wonderful. Yeah. And I've never felt like I was a woman in that space.
Diminished.
I felt like I was a student in that space. And they've always been very supportive and highly generous with their knowledge and time. But I definitely feel like it's part of like my own prejudice, where I remember going into university and like having a female professor for the first time. And like, I could feel some of like these like inaccurate like feelings of like, why don't I like this female professor? And it's just like, is this like internalized like feelings towards women, or am I like, or is she actually just not a great professor? Something, you know. And sometimes it's like
the guilt you feel over feeling like a woman is not a good professor. Yeah, I've definitely had that experience. You know, being a student of leaders and having someone who is, you know, leading me or training me. And I can think of a couple of specific work examples where, you know, I just want us to both build that success from each other, because we're both women and we're both, you know, in the struggle and, you know, in male dominated industries. And, but it is hard to allow yourself to be like, okay, like, yeah, she's a woman, but she's also a shitty leader. And I'm not learning anything from her, and not feeling guilt about that. Not letting someone treat you poorly or not give you what you need from an education standpoint, and only allowing it to happen because you feel like you should.
Yes.
Which, I mean, I think that's fair with men too. I mean, I remember in university I had a professor who, he was brilliant in his field, but I found him to be a terrible professor, and with some conflicting like moral issues. He's actually been let go from Acadia University.
It takes a lot for a tenure track professor to be let go.
Because of this. Anyway, and that was a little bit of like, not redemption, but a little bit of like,
I know what you mean though.
But to be like, oh yeah, okay, like I saw that in him. And even though everybody else was like, yeah, he's an expert, like he's really great, to then see that it was recognized that he was not a super great person, I was like, oh, okay. And I think it's like letting, as women, being okay with letting yourself
trust your gut.
Yeah.
It's truly a phenomenon, and I think it's like overlooked a lot, like our gut instincts, because we're often like gaslit because of our gut instincts, and forced to think that they're not valuable, when it's
welcome to my dating history, Sarah.
Oh girl.
Oh man.
Oh girl.
We could pop off.
We should, if we're ever on Intoxicated, we'll have to do dating history. Shitty exes.
I would love to go through that.
We have some catalogs.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. No, perfect. No, that's what the show is, right? I want to know.
I love that.
Sarah's like, let me hear your pain.
Oh my gosh. That's what it is. There it is, intoxicated in a sentence. Let me hear your pain. But the gut instinct, the intuition that women have, you really need to trust that, because I'll tell you, it's often not wrong.
No, 100%. There have totally been situations where I know this could be better, I know whatever, but I don't feel like I'm in a space where I'm being asked. And you really feel like you need to be asked to give your
Yeah.
opinion,
Oh,
which is so much the
yeah.
difference between like men and women. I feel like men, for the most part, can just be like, oh, I'm here, and that's the invitation. And I know it's annoying, but that is the way you kind of have to be.
Yeah.
Like, I kind of want that.
So hard as a woman, though.
I know.
So hard.
It's really hard to walk into a space. And I find it's even harder when you walk into a space that is all women to do that.
Oh,
Because
yes.
because when a man, but when a man sets the standard of like, I'm just going to say what I think.
Yeah.
It does open the opportunity, if you're willing to take it, to be like, yeah, no, that's stupid. Like, if you're going to openly just give criticism, I'm going to as well.
Yeah.
It's just so much harder for us.
Yeah.
It's just harder to get to that point. And like the women versus women thing, that's a huge point in feminism. The fact that so many women are just so stuck in their ways that they can't open themselves up to potentially make some noise.
Yep.
I'm trying to make some noise in the Halifax comedy scene right now, and I'm finding it really hard to get people backing me on it.
Yep.
And it's going back to the Minute Women episode we just did about, what's her name again?
Agnes Fail.
Nick Fail. You gotta be the person. I heard a quote somewhere that was like, there's people who are meant to weather storms, and then there's people who are meant to like turn around and like face the storm.
And yeah.
Wow.
And like, I just feel like women in podcasting, women comics, like these people who are doing these ballsy things are facing the storm.
Yeah.
And like, if you want something to say, if you have stuff to say, you should make yourself a platform to say that, whether that's a podcast or, you know, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And podcasting
do
is such
that.
an amazing opportunity to do it because it
is.
literally takes nothing.
Yeah.
Like, you do not need fancy equipment to do it. All you need, you can get Audacity for free, which is the editing software that we use for Minute Women. I'm sure you use it
I
as
use
well.
it,
And like some mic. And it doesn't have to be an expensive mic.
And even
really doesn't.
like social media and our merch and everything, like we're like Instagram's free.
Instagram is free. TeePublic is free.
Yeah,
if you
like,
want to make some merch.
If you want to make some merch, like yeah, it's easy. I mean, we record a lot of our episodes now via distance.
Yeah.
And I record at my kitchen table with a microphone taped to a mason jar.
Yeah.
And that's how we do it. And you know, like, you don't need a lot to be able to have your voice heard. And I kind of, when we first launched Minute Women, you know, I was just stoked if like one person, my mom, was gonna listen, like just to have somebody listen. And we were so overwhelmed by the support that we had first coming off that it was intimidating, but it was also so validating.
And because it's your
like,
heart.
And
you're putting your
that's
heart
the
out
thing.
there.
And it wasn't even like we were talking about like controversial topics at first. I mean, we've gotten into some controversial topics. We've gotten more comfortable. But like at first, you know, we're just covering Heritage Minutes, and it wasn't even like I was really laying a lot out there, but it's still like a piece of you that you're sharing. And to like have, you know, feedback is just, even if it's negative feedback from an asshole,
they're hearing it. They heard you.
They listened,
and they loved you enough to take the time to write
that's
a
what it is.
review.
You know.
That's what
I
it
think
is.
one of the 1-star review that has brought my rating down on Apple Podcasts was like, this is what pisses me off about this review, because it was 1 star.
I hate Apple
but
Podcasts.
it was essentially just like, it was a bit slow, but it's not bad. It's not the worst, but not the best.
no.
And they gave you 1 star.
I would have rather
Fuck
you
off.
be like, I hated this. She talked too much. she talked too much about herself, because that's something I'm always insecure about on the show, where I always want to set the precedent that like, it's not an interview, it's a conversation.
Right.
And so
yeah.
like, I might throw in some stuff about my life, but I'm doing it as to bounce things off the person. So it's a conversation and not like a, well, how did you guys start Minute Women? And like, you know what I mean? Like, just very interview. I want it to be a conversation between
for
two
sure.
people. So
I'm super bad at that. I have moments where I'm like doing a podcast with Grace, and I'm like, oh my God, I can remember when I started talking about myself, and I'm still talking about myself, and this is embarrassing.
but don't feel
now.
bad, because it's yours, right?
Yeah.
And the
Right?
thing is
But
like,
for
people to like it and stick with you, they need to like you.
Yeah.
And they need to relate to you as hosts. So, like, as the more you can share about yourself, I think the better. Depending on the podcast, obviously. Like, some podcasts are definitely more
Content-based,
informative-based, and in which case, yeah, it should be more of like a formal interview.
Yeah.
But like comedy podcasts, tell us about yourself. We want to know.
Yeah, because I
like
mean, you can go and read the Canadian Encyclopedia and get most of the information that we share on this podcast, right?
Yeah.
But like,
But you're making
obviously
it
what we're and that's why I always say that like Linnea is such a critical part of this podcast, which like Linnea will always say it's like me talking for the most part and then she's just here, but I'm like, this podcast is absolutely nothing without our friendship. Like without our friendship, it is just spewing of facts that no one's gonna want to tune into, right? And you know, like as long as we keep that as the core and like heart and soul of the podcast, then it's like we could do anything. We can talk about, we can do this instead of talking about just Heritage Minutes, which is something we love to do. But I love that we've been able to like kind of broaden the definition of what our podcast is just by being by understanding what it's about, and it's about us.
It's
as
also
much as it is about history.
Yes,
I feel so lucky because Grace and I were barely friends when we started this podcast.
It's true.
Like
Really?
we didn't really know
We were
each
very
other.
situationally friends, where we were like friends at the curling club,
Like, I
but
curled
didn't
with-
see each other outside of it really.
I curled with Grace for a year and like thought she was cool and whatever, but like I had a very serious needy boyfriend, and you had like such a strong group of friends. Like you had like Shannon and all the engineers, and like
but I was also like going through weird shit of like, it was like I'm moving to Halifax for the first time.
Yeah,
and,
you
like,
were
really
struggling,
feeling like a fish out of water and not being comfortable with it. We can talk about this on Intoxicated.
Yes, please do. This is
We
just
will.
a plug for the future Intoxicated episode. Because you guys are on top of my list for the next round.
Oh,
I'm so
yeah.
excited.
So we'll make it happen very soon, I
I'm
promise.
excited.
We will, but yeah, we
promise.
weren't really. We definitely weren't at the level
Yeah.
of like friendship. Like now, it's just
It was
like
born of circumstance in a lot of ways.
definitely, and I feel so lucky, especially with the pandemic, and especially with me living on the South Shore now,
Yes.
that we have this podcast because you are such a like true and valuable individual in my life.
my
And no, it's
Wow.
true.
What
like
a love
I,
fest this is.
it
know,
is,
it's
yeah.
gross.
And I don't know where I'd be in the past year if I like didn't have like your continued and constant support.
baby.
No, and I mean it.
Number one thing that I'm like so jealous of is people who have co-hosts. And when I look at you guys, like the chemistry is there and the friendship is there and the love for each other is there. And it's so hard as a solo podcaster to keep going when
Yeah, I
you don't
can
have
only imagine.
when you don't have someone going, no, you're valuable. Like stay with it.
yeah.
It's feeling accountable to
tough.
somebody else.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
it's not just accountable to me. I'm accountable to Linnea. Like
Exactly.
I owe her an edit every Wednesday, not just
Right.
myself.
Oh,
like it's not just
interesting,
for
yeah.
me.
Yeah.
No, and when I show up to the podcast, like because it is, and you know, we've been doing this almost
18 months.
almost 2 years.
Yeah, getting there.
And yeah, and the way I feel about it is that, you know, you have, you know, drilled in my head so many times that I am valuable to this show.
You don't want a call her daddy situation.
Right, but I do. I
You don't want one of those. Good. Just learn from their mistakes, okay?
I do. But I show up and I'm just so excited to learn from Grace and like be there and be her cheerleader and her number one fan and be like, yes, everything you're saying is like important and valuable and funny and great, because it just makes the show so much better.
Yeah. Would you ever take on a co-host? I know you've recently brought on an assistant producer.
I would take on a co-host.
Is it you?
But
It would be like a segment. You'd need like a weather woman.
Are you the assistant producer?
No.
Oh, I thought you were like, you've recently brought on an assistant producer.
No, not
it's
me.
I have an
I
excellent.
can barely produce our podcast.
It's really tough because no one is going to be as committed to it as I am.
Yeah.
So if I were to do that, it would probably be like a whole Regis and Kelly thing where I would have a competition to see who would be my co-host. I would take on like guest co-host for
The
like
gauntlet.
a solid month and like see who's better.
And be like, sorry, you didn't make the cut.
Intoxicated. Intoxicated.
Are you intoxicated?
Yeah, I was just gonna say.
I did
how-
just finish
how
my
much
mimosa,
champagne did you
so.
put in there? Yeah, it would be really hard, but I would be open to it. But I'm also open to creating other podcasts.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So-
That is something that I've always thought about, like, because Minute Women is an interesting thing where we started it knowing it has a terminus. There are not an infinite number of heritage minutes. Hence, we've kind of incorporated Have You Got a Minute to try and extend our catalog, right?
Yeah.
But it's kind of like, what do we do if we run out of heritage minutes? Which gratefully, like, so we're a year and a half in, and I think we're maybe halfway through the catalog.
Oh,
like
you're good.
we're definitely, it's not like a short-term issue, but I guess to listeners, you know, everything comes to an end. Like I don't know what happens when we run out of heritage minutes. Do we just change Minute Women into something else? Do we start a new podcast? You
could. So one podcast that I think of when you say that is, this is a little bit TMI, but it's a podcast called How Come, CUM.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
So this comedian Remy started it because she had never had an orgasm, and the whole podcast,
I saw that. It was on Vox at some point.
The whole podcast was based around her learning how to get there, and I think like 10 episodes in or something, she finally made it happen. So she was like, I don't know what to do with this podcast anymore. And now it's just a sex podcast where she dives into different issues about that.
Oh,
so
crazy.
like, that's the joy of podcasting though. It can change and evolve. And Minute Women is the brand.
Yeah.
But like, you didn't sign a contract going, it's only going to be about, you know, heritage minutes.
Yeah.
As long as it's in that field of history and like talking about it in a comedic way, I think you're good.
And when we're not passionate about talking about that type of stuff, that's when I feel like it'll
That's when
like,
it would come to an end. Yeah.
And take breaks, take season breaks, take oh my gosh, take breaks, people.
Yeah,
listening. Are you listening to me? Take a break.
In any part of your life, it doesn't matter if it's podcasting or not. Take a break.
Yeah,
I can't say that enough. I definitely burned myself out with Intoxicated doing it for 4 years straight. Like
that is insane to me. You did it for 4 years. Like we've only recently taken on the editing of our podcast and stuff.
And she says we, but it's her. And like again,
stop it. You're valuable.
You are valuable. We edit the podcast, and like maybe we can talk about Intoxicated because I feel like it's more appropriate for that space than this space. But like we took a hiatus largely because we were in like a legal battle over our podcast, right? And we were on a forced hiatus. And so I will say that doing that did make me more motivated than I ever was to come back and do it.
There you go.
And so
because it's ours now.
And it's
no one's
ours.
gonna take it away. Nobody puts Minute Women in a corner.
You were Taylor Swift, and you're like, now this is ours.
Yeah, we basically did.
Screw you, Scooter Braun.
Yeah, that is the one like thing where
it.
we differ. Where like I do not like Taylor Swift. I know you love her, and I know you are a Taylor Swift fan.
Okay, hang on.
I do not like her.
Talk to me about this. This is my podcast pitch that I want to do, and I seriously want to do it.
Okay,
it's a podcast called Swifted.
Yeah,
and what it is it's me and maybe a co-host. Maybe you. We bring a Taylor Swift hater on.
Yes.
And we try to convince them to be a fan.
Yes.
Whether that's through showing them songs
hate her as a human,
or like little tidbits about her career.
Yeah.
Like we really, really try.
November 19th, when the 8-minute version of All Too Well, 10-minute version of All Too Well. Yeah.
But I seriously want to make this podcast a thing because I think it's niche enough and it's interesting enough.
Would
because
listen for sure.
I know so many people who are like, "There's just something about her. I hate her. I don't like her." And I'm just like, I respect your opinion, but I want to try to change your mind.
That's so funny.
I love that. That's a great idea for a podcast,
right?
I would totally come on as like a producer. I could be on. I could be on an episode.
You would be a guest, and if I mean, we'll have to talk later about how big of a fan you are because you didn't know it was 10 minutes. You thought it was 8. So, but we'll talk about that later, okay?
I used to sit with a pen and decode all of the secret messages in every album cover.
Okay.
I'm there.
You're good. You're good.
Yeah, I didn't like, and I will say up front, I don't hate her as a human. I know there's a lot of people out there who like really despise her as a person.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't have any issue with that. I've just like, and her songs are super catchy. It's just not like something I would turn on.
You're not a stan.
We're going to change that.
I'm not a stan.
We're going to change that.
Okay.
Okay. Swifted. I wonder if it's taken.
I did like the song.
I really want to claim it.
I did like the song Off Folklore with Bon Iver. Or
Exile.
That's a great song.
Good.
That was a good song.
One.
I was like, this is good. I like this.
Yeah, well, I mean, as part of the LGBTQ community, when Betty came out, everybody lost their shit. Oh,
and you need to calm down.
All
another
my friends,
anthem.
I know, you need to calm down. And Dress is another one. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
That was definitely like, one of my very good pals who is a big fan of Minute Women, Alex Boyd. I shoot you out. I shout you out quite often. She gave us one of our best reviews on Apple Podcasts.
No way.
Yeah, but Al like messaged me the day the album came out and was like all of the like lines from Betty and was like Taylor Swift is a lesbian, and I was like, I don't.
That's a whole rabbit hole we could go down.
I don't think, but yeah.
Okay, she could be something.
So to round this out, so if you had to start another podcast, it would be Swifted.
But I have so many other ideas too.
Let's all close with like a podcast that we would start.
Yes.
Like in our head, what would be a good idea for a podcast?
I really want to start one that's all. I mean, it's kind of in the works. I want to start a solo podcast about women in comedy and have
I love that.
And I really want it to be like just about my like a stand-up diary of like what I'm going through as a comedian, and really make it like focused on stand-up. But the other one I want to do is all about music, and I want people to come on with like an album that they like. That was really influential, and go through track by track.
I love that. Just like trying to like kind of like the Taylor Swift thing, but like trying to convince you why something is a great album.
Exactly. That's exactly. I've always wanted
something really
I've wanted to do that for years, but again, it's just time. You know.
Yeah.
All of that.
I love that. What would you do?
Oh, like we've already talked about this a little bit, but like, and I don't know a title for it. I've done a couple like working titles of like Tales from the Flower Shop or like something. Yes. So I've worked at a flower shop, and let me tell you,
there's some stories.
A book's worth of stories, like the shit that you get, like but like
like anonymous florist. Like, that would be a great.
Yeah, actually, I like that. But like you get the people who are sending like pages and pages of love letters to a woman who is never going to take them back. You get like the woman who you deliver flowers to because it's her last day of chemo, and like
I love that.
And then you get like the absolute psycho like people, and then like the funerals of like someone in the town who was really prominent, and then you get like people sending anonymous flowers to people, and the cards that you write, and the crazy things that happen, and the funny stories and the sad stories and the happy stories.
Because like flowers as a product are only something you order for like the happiest of times or the worst
of times. And so you know,
true.
working in a flower shop, working in that environment and atmosphere, like it is a little bit of like you like meet another florist down the street and you're like, yeah, I get it. It's like I like have this relationship where like if I ever order flowers, like I've ordered flowers for Grace, and it's like I'm like, yeah, I work at a flower shop, and then you end up talking for 15 minutes to like the person on the other end being like, like what crazy shit did you deal with today, or like what really like uplifting stuff did you do. So I think like we've talked about it, and a bit it'd be a really cool podcast to do with like one of those podcasts, kind of like Modern Love, which is a podcast that I love, but with like sound effects and like noise, and like, you know, you hear the chime of the door, and like you hear like the person like shuffle in, like the old man who's going to take flowers to his, you know, wife who's in the home and doesn't remember him, but like he takes her flowers every Thursday. Like there's stories like that. Yeah, so it's cool.
I would love it if it were people like writing in and stories, and then like so it's like a combination of like your own personal experience, but also like anonymous florists who are writing in to tell their stories as well. I think that's a great idea for a podcast. I think it would be like really cool.
That would be so cool.
It'd be cool.
What about you guys?
See, I spurred this conversation, and then the whole time I've been trying to think of what podcast I would make. So, I mean, like, me and my brother have, like, had conversations. My older brother, Ben, like, he is like a more serious historian than I am, even though, like, I'm going into my PhD, and he, like, took another route where he's now, like, a librarian. But he's, like, so good at research, and basically he's wanted to do a podcast about the Quebec biker gang wars, which is basically like the Hells Angels operating Quebec. It's insane.
You had a name though.
The Patch.
Yeah, which I love.
Which is because all Hells Angels have patches on their vests and jackets, whatever.
Okay.
But that was something that like we had talked about, and I don't know if I would be like a host or like an editor or something, but like I would love to be like involved with it. I would also love to just get better at editing. That is something like I want to be able to do, and like just like as a skill, like it's a great marketable skill to have when you can like edit audio,
because then you could edit other people's podcasts and
absolutely
get some fulfillment out of that too.
Because like my goal, which has really been born out of like working at Podstarter, has been like I love history, but I don't want to necessarily be a professor. And that's kind of like the main track you have. Is that or working in a traditional museum setting, which is fine, but I don't find it overly creative fulfilling. And we had this guy come to St. Mary's when I was there, and he gave us like kind of a presentation about how he did go a very traditional academic route, but then started his own business basically as a consultant. Like he was like a historical consultant to creative projects, and he ran like
that would be perfect for
he
you.
ran like tours of London. So like you would go and he would guide you through like World War II landmarks in
There's
London
people like
and
that
stuff.
for cinema too.
Yeah.
Because
Like
Lunenburg,
I would love to do consulting for like movies. And
so cool.
There's a
Like,
guy who does it in Lunenburg who's like a
So cool.
historian, and like that's what he does. So like so whenever the films and stuff are in town, he like discusses historical accuracy and like like when Book of Negroes was filmed in Lunenburg, like he did all of the like historic, because it was filmed between Lunenburg and Shelburne. Yeah, and he was like the historical content.
It's amazing.
Like person.
That'd be perfect for you.
Yeah, I would love to do something like that, which is like, and I think like podcasting will always be like part of that.
I mean, that's gonna
because
help you
it's
get there.
such a public forum to discuss your ideas, and like I understand the academic process and why it's there, and I think it's certainly necessary. Like it's really important to have a lot of eyes on your work before it sees the public. But my perspective has always been like, it doesn't matter how much effort you put into it if it's only ever going to be circulated among other historians. Like you need to have a more accessible forum to have that research heard. And so it's really important to take high quality level research and put it into accessible public forms. So that's kind of always been like part of like the mission of Minute Women anyways, is like doing
you guys are doing
something like that.
Yes.
But if I had to start another podcast, I feel like I would want it to be a little less research focused. Like I love doing this. Like I love having these kinds of conversations. So whatever it would be. I would love to start a podcast with my brothers, actually. I know there's a lot of sibling podcasts in the world.
No,
and
that's awesome.
I know
like
internally siblings are so like whatever. But it's me and my three brothers. We're all distinct ages. Like my oldest brother is turning 29 and my youngest brother is 17. Oh my God. So we just all have these like, we have this very fun dynamic, and I would love to start a podcast with them at some point.
And I would argue, knowing you, having met and spent time with all of you together and apart, is that you are all very similar, very obvious that you're siblings physically and just like how you interact with each other, but also distinctively different.
We all have very distinct perspectives.
Yeah. And I think that you guys would be great. Like
the McNut podcast. Yeah. Cracking the nut with the McNuts. I don't even know.
The problem when you have a last name like McNut is people just constantly want to make puns with it.
Yeah, that's true.
What street do you live on?
Cromarty. We grew up on Cromarty Street or Pleasant Street in Dartmouth.
Yeah, Cromarty Street.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I like
the Cromarty Street
Cromarty
kids.
Street, yeah.
Cromarty Street kids.
I love that we all have so
I
many
love because
ideas.
there's a podcast out there that exists like My Brother, and Me.
Yes.
It's a great podcast.
That's actually
love
really
it.
good.
But for us, for me, it would be My Brother, My Brother, and Me. but for them, they would have to say My Brother, and My Sister and Me. But from my perspective, it's perfect.
And it's all about you.
It's all about me.
It should be.
She's the only girl. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for taking a minute and listening to another Have You Got a Minute? And Sarah, thank you so much for coming.
This was so fun.
You are phenomenal and
What a love
so
fest.
funny. And and I just feeling the love today, feeling the heat. It is warm in here for our listeners at home.
We endured.
But a fantastic time as always with some great gals.
You guys should be very proud of Minute Women. Like
Aw,
it's
thanks.
truly so amazing,
Sarah.
and you guys are gonna get famous, and I'm gonna be like, I was on that podcast.
When we become famous,
Joint
Together.
tour.
it'll be a joint tour.
Joint tour.
Yeah.
That would be so much fun.
That's the dream. That's truly the dream.
We should try like long-term goal, maybe like a year or two out. We should try and do like an Atlantic circuit tour.
That would be so fun.
Women in podcasting tour.
Cool.
Yeah.
And everyone should go check out the Intoxicated Podcast. It has an incredible catalog that you can go through and catch up on. And you release weekly, don't you?
Weekly as of now.
we shall see. Stay tuned. But weekly as of now. She also does video, so you can visually take in all the beauty. Your set is gorgeous.
Also, your new cover art is
so good.
Fire.
Thank you.
It's
my favorite picture of myself.
No,
it really is.
No, but it reads through. You're just so confident in that picture, and you've posted it and shared it, and those glitter tears are just fantastic.
You were there when I came up with
the highs and lows of Sarah rebranding. Maybe we could talk about this on Intoxicated.
We'll get into it.
The highs and lows of every day, the drama of Sarah's rebranding was insane and amazing. And I love John would totally be there, they'd be like, "Well, don't worry about this too much."
It's gonna be a 4-hour episode we do on Intoxicated. It's gonna be 2 days. It'll be a sleepover.
We're doing Rogan length for you guys.
For sure. Okay.
Yes.
Can't wait.
So check out the Intoxicated Podcast, and if you haven't gotten enough Men and Women, go to our website, minutewomenpodcast.ca. You can check out all our social media platforms and our merch store, which is the best way you can support the podcast. Rate and review the podcast on Apple Podcasts if you get an opportunity. We gotta outweigh the negativity that we get sometimes.
Yeah, please do. Write a long 5-star review. As long as the bad 1-star one.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, and also we're on YouTube now.
And we are on YouTube.
Go enjoy that.
If that's your preferred platform, so you can check that out as well. And we will see you next week.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, guys.